Big time fight at featherweight. We have Kamaka III, the fighting Hawaiian, taking on downtown TJ Brown. And Matt, we have a great interview on the channel from our own JHK with Kamaka, and really interesting developments. If I give you the Cole's notes, it's cheating, but he's made the move from Hawaii to Vegas. And is it the 9th island? Is it the 10th island? What is Toronto even? I don't know, but he's made the move to Extreme Couture. And you want to talk about a wealth of training partners there, getting the chance to work with Mads Burnell and Jeremy Kennedy, Bellator's own former UFC vets, but guys with really high ceilings. And I know, listen, Jeremy didn't win his last fight, but Adam Borch is a great fighter. And you look at it too, I mean, Boston Solomon as well as Dan Ige, a couple of guys that he also trains with there. He really credits kind of the overall body of work he's been able to put at the gym with some of the improvements he's been able to make to his game. And he was able to go to Ruka Sport here not that long ago and get the chance to train with Chito Vera ahead of his last fight, as well as the one and only BJ Penn, who he looks up to as a mentor. So, for Kamaka III coming into this fight, he had a rough time out his last time, and he talked about it as much with JHK. But, yeah, he fought JSP, Jonathan Pearce, who's also featured on this card, who looked absolutely terrible in his debut. And in the first round, Kai looked pretty good. I mean, his boxing was going pretty good. Everything was working. And then in the second round, JSP decided to wrestle him, and he beat the brakes off him, and he finished him. So for Kamaka III, that halted the win streak. For TJ Brown, he's coming in here on a 2-fight losing streak. He spent a little bit of time at Westside MMA. He's been training with Bryce Mitchell, primary training partner there, but we also saw Dakota Bush spending some time. He just had his UFC debut against Austin Hubbard. We've also seen him again. Glory Fitness and MMA, you're going to see a lot of big names there. And who's the biggest guy at Glory right now? I don't know. James Krause, who are we going to go with? Tim Elliott? We're going to go with
Smith?
Julian Marquez, all kinds of names that have spent time at Glory MMA, and it seems like they continue to grow. And for TJ Brown, what do we know about him? This guy is a submission threat, and listen, it's kill or be killed. We saw it in the fight against Jordan Griffin, where he pretty much just wrestled himself into exhaustion, and Jordan Griffin got him. And then in his last fight, he goes out there, he misses weight, he fights Danny Chavez, and did he win the third round? Probably. I mean, it was close, but he got totally outpieced in the first 2 rounds. And Chavez was mad. I mean, Brown lost 20% of his purse, and if you're only making 10, 12 grand, that's a lot of money. So for Brown, coming in here hungry, hasn't won a fight in UFC out of 2 of them. For Kamaka, he won his debut against Tony Kelly, and he lost that fight against Jonathan Pearce. Got to be weird to see Pearce in the fighter hotel and walking into the Apex facility. But I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this fight because Kamaka, fairly well-rounded. TJ Brown, you know exactly what you're going to get. I like it.
So with Kamaka, it's kind of weird because I put him in this like Impa Kasanganai category where you look at them and you go, okay, you're great at knocking people unconscious, right? Then you look at the record and it's like, wait, you win all of your fights by decision. It is kind of odd because normally when you have a fighter who is that heavily muscled, who is a primary striker, they're they will put people down and they will put them away. But Kamaka, it's odd. It's almost like he has knocked down but not knocked out power. Now, I'm not always saying that's a bad thing because honestly, he is a reserved fighter and he's not a fighter who I'm always worried about. Like you kind of mentioned with TJ Brown, where if he is wrestling, it can almost be a bit of an Achilles heel where if he's having success with the wrestling, he might just go to that pond over and over and over again and he'll get tired due to it. With Kamaka, even if he has his opponent hurt, he will stay reserved. Now, I would like to see him burn his gas tank maybe a little bit more to get some people out of there because for Kamaka, he can struggle, especially with wrestlers, and that's really what this fight is going to come down to. Can TJ Brown out-wrestle Kamaka until his cardio fails him? Now, I think Kamaka, with the great training partners at Extreme Couture, it's a fairly easy fighter to game plan for if you're fighting TJ Brown. You kind of know what he's going to come at you with. Now, is it going to be tricky if he does get you to the mat? Yes, it will be, but I do think Kamaka, with his wealth of training partners, and just his overall decent takedown defense. Now, I don't think it's great, and especially the Jonathan Pearce fight is a weird one, and you kind of alluded to it. I know we're going to talk a lot more about Pearce in a bit, but Pearce, I just don't really know what he is. I know he looked awful against Joe Lozon, who was on his way out of the UFC, and I know he looked like a world beater against Kamaka.
In the second round.
Exactly, in the second round. But still, Pearce is just one of those unknown commodities for me that I don't have a great read on. So just by definition, I don't have the best read on Kamaka either, but Honestly, I do think this fight really is just going to come down to the wrestling. If Brown can get Kamaka to the mat, though, I have no doubt that Brown is the much superior grappler once he gets to the mat. I don't think he will run into that Jordan Griffin issue to where if he is tired, Kamaka's this massive submission threat, especially off of his back. I do think if Brown could just keep this fight up against the cage, and again, people hate it when I say it, and I don't like saying it either, make this a somewhat boring fight if he can just have that grinding style, kind of like what we saw Joe Selecki use against Jim Miller. Now, I'm not saying he's going to secure as many takedowns as Selecki did, but you don't have to make the fight exciting just to win, and it might not do the best for your popularity, but all people care about at the end of the day is the W or the L on your record, and I do think if Brown can again slow this fight down, he will be able to get that win.
Matt, I said this a while ago, and it's really funny because you look at some of these fighters and they've got like the prepackaged meals and they're shredded and everything's going all that great, like Norma Dumont over on the Instagrams, and then yikes, missing weight tremendously. But TJ Brown, it looks like he's actually invested a little bit into the strength and conditioning, and hopefully he's able to make weight and it's not an issue because he's going to be the way bigger fighter in this one. Like, Kai Kamaka used to fight at bantamweight. He's had his last 4 or 5 fights up at featherweight, but he's not the biggest guy for the division. And TJ Brown, he's not small, but he's not like the biggest guy. It's an interesting clash there. And again, for me, I look at Kai Kamaka. I mean, he was a minus 305 in that fight against Jonathan Pearce, and you worry about how bad he struggled with the wrestling. And it was just rinse and repeat out of the takedowns from Jonathan Pearce, who again, kind of tough to get a read because of the Lozon fight and then the way he looked against Kamaka. But I can see Kamaka having a little bit of success on the feet, but not to the extent that Danny Chavez had. So if we have a look at the odds, Kamaka opened a minus 225. He's a minus 160 right now. TJ Brown opened a plus 190. He's now a plus 132 or thereabouts on best fight odds. Best part of it, we get to look at the Tapology votes. And out of 918, 85% with Kamaka, 87% by decision. Maybe you think he's going to have one of those Tony Kelly type performances, but it's tricky.
I'm going to side, I guess I'm going to go against the Tapology voters and against the odds. I actually like TJ Brown's chances in this fight, and it does come down to that wrestling. I just think if he's able to get the takedown, and if he's able to get on top of Kamaka, it's going to be a tough ask for Kamaka just to get back up to his feet without getting submitted. And with TJ Brown, I do really think it is only going to take that one takedown in the center of the cage to really get enough, A, damage off, or B, get to a decent enough position to really invoke his submission game. And I do think TJ Brown can win this fight as the underdog.
TJ Brown, he's let me down time and time again. Just twice, but he's let me down both times. And listen, I'm going to go with him this time. I really still feel like TJ Brown can make somewhat of an impact. You might look at the record, 14-8? It's not all that impressive, but if you look at the way that he's able to get things done, the way he's able to control on the ground, as long as he can kind of reserve his gas tank. And again, we did see him get that third round against Danny Chavez, who we saw had a gas tank problem in his last fight in the third round. But I still do like TJ Brown in this one. He's going to be the heavier guy on top, and if Kamaka gets his back up against the cage or up against the mat, it could be a big issue. So, Matt, both of us going with the underdog, downtown TJ Brown, to get the win. It's a really interesting fight, and you got to check out that interview with JHK and Kai Kamaka III. I'll link it. It's on the channel. Matt, we got a great card. Co-main event, Cub Swanson taking on Giga Chikadze in this division. In the main event, you have Yuri Prochazka making a second time out, taking on Dominic Reyes in the main event. Wow. Big time fights. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.